Unless you want to be front and center on the cam. Yeah,
Oh,
just saying.
we're also being watched. Yeah. I spilled toothpaste all over myself today, so that was great.
Nervous.
So how do you guys think you want to set this up?
I know.
I know.
Okay, I'm glad you're nervous.
So everything you say, Canon will be used against you. And we are now streaming live to YouTube, so this will be recorded. It wasn't meant to be a three down or
Not successful.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first PD session. I'm so excited that you guys could make it.
We're kind of focusing on this side. There we go. Now you're
Okay,
down. Good.
but you don't need to.
Yeah.
I'm not the one you need to record.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm just glad that you guys could make it. And so I know that it has been a struggle and a theme that we hear from instructors all the time, that as the student numbers in the classroom are going up, that it's very hard for us to do things like group work and more interactive stuff with the students with large numbers in the classroom. So we thought that we would start our PD series with that particular topic, where I know that we have, and I'm sure you all have, but this is not, and I just want to say it up front, that it's not about the three wonderful ladies that have agreed to come and talk to you as a panel about what they're doing in the classroom. By no means they're experts in this field. We were more so looking for people that can share best practice or practices that they're doing. So, I mean, they have tried things out or they've tried different strategies. And what we need to know from them is what's working, what's not working, what should we keep or what should others look at and what not. So again, I just want to make sure, because I know there was a concern out there by at least one of them that I know of. But I'm not an expert. That's the first thing we said. And it is not about being experts. It's about sharing your experiences and sharing what you feel may be best practice or better practice compared to things that are definitely don't do that kind of thing. So anyways, I'd like to welcome Anna,
Hi.
Erin, and Kim. So anyways, so do you guys want to maybe, so the way I think we have put out the agenda, just a brief introduction, how many people you're teaching, how long have you been here, and 10 minutes, and then we'll bring it to the Q&A, which is where I think would be the value in terms of
Is this my whole 10 minutes right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not fast.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull one thing out before we get started.
And I'm gonna grab a piece of paper so that you have one here. Yes. Maybe because I just like to do a sign-in sheet for, so we know who has attended today. Start with Jen.
Oh. Have we seen anything there? Not so much.
Not so much just yet.
You're not allowed to see it though. It's really hands working.
Come in.
Grab my.
Well, all that good stuff. So my name is Annalise, but I affectionately go by Anna or Hey You. It's my third year here at SAIT teaching, going into my third year. And I've been an advanced care paramedic for 10. The largest groups that I teach right now are 76 people, which when you walk in the room is a little overwhelming, the amount of faces looking at you, but I've learned to become comfortable in storytelling, and that's how I connect with students. I very rarely stand at the front of the room. I like to walk in between everybody, so they're moving, and they have to move their head and watch me and get off their social media, and I, in general, don't find I face those problems in my class, because I'm trying to connect with them on a personal level. So one of the ways I do that when I'm talking about kind of rules of engagement in the classroom, I try to keep that part light and fun. So I say, one year a student said, "You're like our coach, Anna." It's like, this is a good way of connecting with people. I say, "I'm your coach, you're my team. I have a responsibility to you to teach you the information, and you have a responsibility to me to make sure you do the learning. So when you come to class, we get to have fun. I'm going to tell you the stories, I'm going to tell you my mistakes so that you will remember what I'm teaching you." And I'll do that as I'm walking around. And generally people are laughing and hooting and hollering. Sometimes it gets a little out of control. That's the only downside. Yeah. But I think just, being a person first rather than their authority is working for me. So I thought I would show you what I do as far as my management of how I deliver information instead of just telling you what to do. So this is a new strategy for me. I'm sure you've heard of Kahoot, and if you haven't heard of Kahoot, it's amazing. So that website is called Kahoot.com. If you don't mind pulling your phone out, open up the browser and go to Kahoot. We're just going to do one question. I'm going to show you how I deliver information in a way that isn't like, my worry is that they go home, that they do their reading, and then they come to class and there's no benefit to sitting in class, and so they just don't come. I don't find that that's a problem for me. So we're going to go to Kahoot. This is what the website looks like. I'd like you to go to here, enter game pin. And I'd like you to enter that pin. Just as you're doing that, I will also pull it up. Hopefully we can get it right in here. Has anybody been to Kahoot before? Okay, that's good. So the only thing you have to do is you have to prepare your Kahoot beforehand. You prepare your questions. And then you get everybody to sign into the game as you prepare it.
You guys get to sign in?
Just wait 2 seconds, I just have to sign in.
Oh, yeah.
Can you make the game pin number bigger?
I don't know. All right, so now you should have your game.
It just takes a second.
There we go. Okay, there's your game pin.
What is it?
Recognize the name.
Try that one more time. Try it one more time.
No.
Is it working?
I think, no. Yeah, this
Sorry,
is
let's
the
try
thing.
this game.
Yeah.
I basically opened it up. I was just trying to show you a screenshot for me.
Trying to show us how to troubleshoot.
Yeah, I've only just played it, but people haven't tried to show them how. So if you try this, what happens on the screen is everybody that connects through their phone to the game, they'll start popping up here. To me, this is responsible use of technology within the classroom, and the students really like it. So I'm just going to talk about stroke for 2 seconds to see how would I use a game in class. I don't want them to come and just me reiterate signs and symptoms of a stroke, whole bunch of words on a PowerPoint, and within 2 PowerPoint slides, they're bored to death. Okay? I'm going to throw the question up. Is everybody in that wants to be in? Okay, first question. You guys got about 30 seconds to answer this. On your screen, there's going to be true or false. Hit true or false. Oh, I've done this wrong. Shoot. Sorry, choose an answer. It doesn't matter. I've done this wrong, pardon me. We got 10 seconds or so to find your answer. You've got the color-coded boxes on your screen, on your phone. And there's discussion that can happen. And I encourage a discussion as the students trying to figure this out. This is just a whole bunch of words in one of our pharmacology manuals that's 174 pages long. I mean, they're going to get lost in that. But as soon as we come here, well, we have 2 people that achieved the correct answer. There's a couple of things that happen. Like, everybody's like, yeah, you know, and 45 of them win. I'm like, oh, everybody knows, not to move on. This is the time that I connect with you about the learning opportunity, right? You've chosen your questions, you've chosen your answers. Now I'm going to talk to you about the drug master. And I'm going to tell you all the components behind it. I'm going to tell you the drug dose. So that gives me a chance to see that 45, well, 18 of you don't know the drug dose, but that's okay. We're going to talk about it. It's also good for the students to recognize they're not alone in how this is, in where their knowledge is at. So that's how I use in a classroom setting. What I learned is you have to make those 10, you have to make your questions drive your conversation. Because if there's no point behind the question or there's no learning opportunity, it's just another game that they walk out going, okay, well, whatever. So that's what I did. I just didn't get the right one. So that's how Kahoot is built. The next thing that I do in class, I do use PowerPoint, but my PowerPoints are generally not over 20 slides. At max, they're 30. And this is kind of what they look like. Very simple. I want them paying attention to the knowledge that comes out of my mouth, rather than worrying about the 1,000 words that you put on one slide and say, everything here is what you need to know. That's what their reading is for. They come to class so that I can separate the need to know from the good to know. So I say, okay, well, look at all the stuff you have to evaluate on an airway. Then we talk about it a little bit. We talk about those components, and then we get into the steps. Again, I've got pictures. We have the step. We know what they're looking for. And when I evaluate this with the students, so the very first slide will say, well, this next going to be tough. We don't have a lot of room to move the tongue out of the way so you can see the vocal cords. Everybody has read about that, and they go, oh, yeah, okay, good. Now let's take a look for the next few slides. This is their time to critically think. I have a picture of somebody. To me, this would be difficult to intubate them. But I want to see if you can pick out what the problem is. And then can you express it and validate why that's going to be a problem for you. So they have a group discussion, and then we have a major group discussion about it. And I might have to tailor where their knowledge is at, but it's all based off this picture. So it's their application of knowledge into a picture instead of just saying, oh, well, this is the critical thinking component and you need to be better at it. I'm trying to foster that with them. Make sense? So most of my PowerPoints are just pictures of just random things I found on the internet that isn't copyright problems. And they're applying knowledge. And what happens is over an 8-week period of time, they actually will see this person and not see that the person is large, but see that this would be a complicated airway. I might need to troubleshoot this in a different way, which is the whole goal of what they're coming to class for, so that they can walk out and be thinking paramedics and make sound decisions. My last thing that I do is I do case studies. So when we're talking about like pathophysiologies or pathology, I think it's very boring, and I've tried it, to have signs and symptoms, treatment plan, this is the physiology, moving on. They're not connecting the dots. They were coming on truck with us, and you've got a patient and they were getting lost in the amount of nonsensical information. So what I've chosen to do, the first thing I do is I present the case study and I give them 5 minutes to go over very simple information. To me, it's very obvious what's going on, but to the new learner, it's not. So they get to connect with their people in class. Once they've done the connections, I just ask who would like to share what they think is going on. And as they start talking, I'll say, is it blood pressure a problem or no? No, and that's not. Great, explain why you don't think it is if you feel comfortable to do so. And by the end of like 10 case studies, people are able to pick out what the problem is very quickly, which is what we do on truck. So they feel there's a connection between the classroom setting and then the clinical setting. Once they've figured out the problem, that's when I take the moment to say, all right, good job, you figured out that it was the stomach flu. What is the stomach flu? And then I'll do my little presentation here based off of a picture that should represent gastroenteritis. That way they're not bored. Otherwise, like, you lose those people who are not connecting on the 3 styles of learning. I believe that you have people who are going to learn by watching, doing, and listening. And somewhere in your lecture, you have to connect with all 3. Otherwise, you're boring half of the class. So I prefer to be a little more hands-on. The last thing is case studies that I do is there's a couple purposes behind it. This style here I found doesn't connect with somebody who's dyslexic or having a challenge in their classroom setting about reading as fast as perhaps I would. Maybe they're not speed readers and able to pull out pertinent information. They're just at that stage of learning. They're not going to say that in a classroom setting. So what I've chosen to do is I put it on a piece of paper, and this becomes a worksheet. And the whole class becomes about, maybe for the first hour, sussing out this case study. And then it gives me an opportunity to walk around and connect with each single person. How are you doing? Do you have questions? Do you want me to spend some one-on-one time with you? Or are you doing okay? Generally, I find about 5 students need that one-on-one attention. That gives me the time to do it, instead of just blowing through this type of information or this type of presentation. So I do both in all my classes. That way, everybody feels satisfied with what I'm doing. Okay. Oh, sorry, my Kahoot didn't work.
Okay, Erin, so I made you guys sign already, but now I found the official signs. So I'm going to sign it again. Just try to keep it out. Yeah, absolutely. Last piece, that's strategy.
And this is a survey for you guys that I would really like. And Kimberly couldn't be here today, but she would like it as well, just so that we can.
It's not always what the conversation is.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Erin Chiquette. I teach in the respiratory therapy program. I've been here at SAFE just like Annalise going into my 3rd year teaching. And I was an RT out in clinical practice for about 10 years before I came here. So like a lot of you, coming in kind of out of healthcare in a general sense and moving into 62 people sitting in front of me, waiting to learn is very challenging, right? Trying to engage people, trying to keep them interested, trying to keep them off of their social media, like Annalise mentioned. So I'm going to share 3 or 4 things that I've done. Like Lena said, I'm not an expert in this, right? There hasn't been a heavy amount of research done in the things that I'm about to tell you. This is just based on student feedback, what has been working best for them, okay? So let's start with this one. I actually stole from our World Cafe that we had last summer. So this is a website called Mentimeter. What Mentimeter does is fairly similar to Kahoot, where you can make multiple choice, graphs, that kind of thing. But what really interested me about this was the word cloud feature. So I don't know if you guys remember that from our cafe, that it was, we were asked to submit a word. Okay, so you go to this website here where you create a question. So the question that I'm going to ask you guys is, what is the most challenging thing to you about teaching in a large classroom size? So very similar to Kahoot, there will be a number up there. So go to Mentimeter and enter in this number. I'll show you guys how this works. So you go up to present mode here. So if you go to mentimeter.com and use the code 356338, it's going to give you a choice of entering 3 word options in there. So I'll get you guys to enter those and we'll talk about how I use this. Is everybody able to access that? Okay, so once you get to that, you can start entering in words. And as you submit the words, we're going to start forming a word cloud on the screen. There.
This is where you're looking for kind of one word thing, isn't it?
So as they start coming up, you'll start speaking. So what I use this for, I found it very challenging to ask kind of generic questions to a large group of people. You just get crickets usually when you do that, and a little bit of sleepiness as well. I teach a lot of our clinical practice. So I teach a clinical practice class where we talk a lot about soft skills, things like that. So last year I was really excited about issues in healthcare, vaccinations, flu, all these crazy things that are going on in our healthcare system. And I'm like, all right, guys, let's talk about issues in healthcare. What are some issues? Nothing. Not one hand went up, right? So I was a little dejected after that. I was so excited about talking about issues in healthcare. So what I started to do was use this Mentimeter. That way students feel like they can put something forward. It's less intimidating. It doesn't single them out in a crowd, right? And I start to get, there we go. So this large one, discussions, that means a lot of you put discussion up. So I can see where the general sense of the class is. So I use this in my patient assessment course, and I ask the question, what does patient-centered care mean to you? So these are all first-year students, 2 weeks into the program, right, that really know little about healthcare, but all of us have had an experience in healthcare, right? Or a family member that's had experience. So it was really, really successful in kind of drawing out some of those common themes. And then I feel like they felt more comfortable continuing that discussion after they've done this in this kind of really anonymous way. Okay, so that's a way that I engage in those kind of classes where you want a bit more of a discussion happening and less of a lecture style. I've had a couple of my colleagues use this as well to test it out, because this is pretty new for me testing it out, and they had lots of success with this as well. So kind of a good one to use at the beginning of a class to get the discussion started. So that's one technique I use. Another one I'm going to talk about is a game called Heads Up. This one logistically can be a little challenging. So make sure that you have a decent sized classroom, and then 105 is a good classroom for this, because you're going to be breaking students up into small groups, into 10 small groups. So essentially what the Heads Up game is, if anyone's seen Ellen, they know what this is, right? So all I do, really simple, if I have a module that is very terminology heavy, for instance, this semester I'm teaching labor and delivery. There's tons and tons of terminology there that most of them have never heard of, right? Lots of things to memorize, lots of ways to kind of think about it, right? So I just take about 50 cue cards and I put just a term from the course. So I've got about 50 terms. I group those into cards of 5 or 6 and put them all around the classroom. So there's going to be 10 stations of cards, okay? I also put the directions up on the screen because I have a lot of confused students when I started this topic, or when we start, right? I break the students up into groups of 5 or 6, and each group will go to a station of words. every student will get a card that they don't look at. And then I start a timer. They'll have 2 minutes at that station to guess all of their words, okay? So for instance, what I've written here is stethoscope. You're gonna assume that I didn't know this word, right? And I hold it up to my forehead, and my group has to explain to me using terminology from that class, what term is this, okay? I find that this really engages the students because it gets them up and moving, right? And we're not just memorizing terms here, you're actually using it in the context that it's taught in. So I find that really valuable for reviewing modules. I do this before each of my midterms, before each of my finals. And then that way, I'm walking around the room while this is happening, and I can see the words that they're struggling with, right? The terms they're struggling with. So then I can take those terms and put them into Kahoot, like Annalise does, to really enforce that, that kind of terminology better. Okay, so that's a second thing I do. Try to engage a large classroom size. This one I stole from a colleague. So Rodel does creating your own multiple choice questions. Okay, so I'm sure all of you realized coming to a teaching environment, it is difficult to create multiple choice questions, right? There's a lot of research that goes into multiple choice questions. And Rodel had this brilliant idea where he's like, why don't we just get the students to create multiple choice questions, right? They're not all wonderful, difficult, powerful multiple choice questions, right? So you do have to go afterwards and edit them, make sure that they're correct, right? So there is a bit of legwork in this one, but it's really valuable to the students because once you've gone in and edited and made any corrections that are necessary, now you can post those and it's more review questions for them. Usually he has a little carrot at the end of that saying that the best multiple choice question that's created here is going to be on your midterm or final, okay? Then that's something that they've seen, they've practiced, and they've actually created themselves. So they feel a little bit of a part of that as well. Kahoots, so I love Kahoots as well. I know Lisa is happy to see you do that because it's super useful, right? Even just, if you don't want to make a 20 question Kahoot up, even 2 or 3 questions just to say, hey, remember what we were talking about last week? They don't have to be really complex. None of my Kahoot questions are challenging like they would be on a quiz or midterm. It's just more for recalling information from the last class. So that's something else I do. I did want to touch as well on small group work because there are lots of things that were really valuable in tech that we learned that I had a lot of challenges. So one of the ones was where a group is assigned a topic and they report back. Okay, so that one, I would advise if you're going to tackle that one, make sure it's a 2-hour-long class. Okay, trying to squish that into 50 minutes. I usually do groups of 4 to 5, so groups of 4 to 5, and so there's going to be 10 to 12 groups that are reporting back that information, right? Be really cautious of the topics you assign. If they're complex topics, it usually doesn't go well. I get a lot of pushback when I do that of, well, you're the teacher, you should be instructing me on this, right? This really complex topic. So usually it's straight up memorizing anatomy, that kind of thing that I use for the group topics. Another pushback I get on that one is I'm embarrassed to talk in front of the class, right? And so I think it's all about how you sell it. So how I sell it is when you're out there in the RT profession, you're going to have to speak in rounds. You're going to have to speak in front of a bunch of nurses, a bunch of physicians, a pharmacist, a physical therapist, and they're all going to be listening to you, right? This is an environment where we're all friendly here, we're all in the same boat. This is your chance to practice speaking in rounds, okay? So really kind of sell that for them. So yeah, making sure that you're using simple topics and when they're reporting out, making sure that you've got lots of time. So I usually give them 5 minutes to report out. And then preparing for that, I prepare a set of objectives that I want to be covered in all of those topics. And if they're missed in a really non-threatening way, I say, well, did you consider this, right? You've got to be really careful there because you don't want it to look like you're telling them that they're wrong, right? And so I think the language that you use here is really important. And like, have you considered this? What about this approach, right? So it's asked more as a question rather than as a challenge or an add-on of those objectives. So those are 3 or 4 things that I do. I mean, take risks. Some of them are going to bomb. I've certainly stood up looking like a complete idiot with some of these projects that tried out, right? So it is going to be a little crash and burny, and that's okay, right? I usually tell them that this is the first time I'm trying this out. I'm looking for feedback, looking to see how this is going to work, right? So to me, it's all about open, honesty, transparency with students, and so I always give them that information. This slides.
Great, well, good, I get to the last, and of course, everybody's kind of taken bits and pieces that I was gonna go over, so we should have got together before this, but there, I'm with the Dell Assistant Program, and I've been at SAGE for a much longer period of time, 15 years, I think this is my 15th year with the Dell Assistant students, and I've seen our cohort go from 48 to the 70s, and now we're at 104. So it's in a pretty big class. So I'd like to touch base on something that we haven't really talked about, and that's it's kind of simple, but it has worked really well for me. In a large class, I feel like a student feels very isolated, okay? So basically, I try to get to know those students' names as quickly as I can, because then you're building some sort of relationship with that student. And I'll even try to greet the student by using their name if I see them in the hallway or they're coming into class. And again, I'm trying to build that relationship so that the student doesn't feel as isolated in a class of 104, because I think sometimes they just feel like a number sitting in a back of a classroom. So that has really worked well. Also giving a place for the students to ask questions outside of the classroom as well has really helped, because a lot of students aren't going to feel comfortable raising their hand within the class, especially in a large class size. So giving them opportunities, discussion boards. So all of my classes will have an online component that has discussion boards, and I've even broken it down into all the outcomes in the course so that the student can pose their question for the specific outcome, broken it down into assignments as well. So again, if there's those questions, they can post them and I can answer. And it does help me a little bit too, instead of fielding 104 emails for the same question. I really push the students to use that discussion board, because then they may not have thought of that question. They have the answer that I've posted. And I also try to encourage some interaction with the students. If it's a question that only I can answer, I'm going to facilitate that answer, but I also encourage the students to try to post their own answers, get some discussion going in that kind of forum, okay? It can be as simple as just having a box. As you go out, you had a question that we didn't have time or didn't have a chance to answer, to pop it in. And then I spoke to my colleagues, and Anna has used an online forum. It's called Socrates. I don't know, has anybody used that? So it's real time. The students, so they log in, and Anna, please pipe in if I'm going to get this wrong. So they're going to sign in, and then in real time during the class, the questions are coming at you, and you can take the time to answer them or go back to them later, post them on the discussion board if you don't have time as well. And Alan, you were mentioning too that you have something very similar as
Yeah,
well.
I use it for this.
Yeah.
Some of them work better than
And others, yeah. And Anna, you were?
Yeah, I found the Socrates one because it's 104 of them, and every time you ask them, do you have a question? Nobody has a question, but everybody has a question. So I will put the slide, and it's the same code for the entire year. So they don't have to think of another code. I always have it with them. And my question to the class is usually, I need more clarification on, and they write the questions. So I say, okay, there's 20 questions. Let's answer 5, and let's move along. I go back and multiply. So I typically leave myself 10 minutes to answer these questions. They're anonymous. So when I set them up initially, it's anonymous. So the students feel like, okay, you don't really know who I am. In instance, if someone does put a inappropriate comment, I have a way to find it out because I can just expose the student on my private and have a conversation with them, so that ends very quickly. And then I have information, send it to my email about if I do any kind of, if I need some kind of information about quiz and agree or disagree, all the data is transferred to me as well. So that works great with questions.
Great, thank you. And then again, to kind of minimize that feeling of isolation in the larger groups, I try my best to provide opportunities for interaction between the students and their peers and with myself, and that's where those active learning techniques that my colleagues here were mentioning. So yes, to use Kahoot, so question and answer, interactive question and answer. Kahoot is just one example of that. Clickers, I know that there are clickers available here on Sage is another method that you can do those interactive Q&A with your classes. I think also, and again, these are just little simple things, not so, I think we're pretty good at the active learning, but is being available to the student after class a little bit. So, and I know that sometimes our schedules don't allow for that, but if I can be there for a few minutes after class for that student that needs something clarified that we haven't done, I think that goes a long way to developing those relationships. Having hours, office hours, TA hours, whatever you want to call them, where the student can, again, make time with me to have those interactions. It's not a time that I'm there to teach them, again, what they've missed, but there to come with questions. And again, we can have more of an interaction and build that relationship with the students. And then again, as my colleagues mentioned, is trying to use teaching techniques within the classroom that do make those relationships, okay? And it's like the Kahoots, it's like the use of the PowerPoint, group work for really complicated concepts or idea. I teach embryology and histology, so which can be quite difficult for a student to learn. So I do something similar to you, where I have packs of cards that have the embryonic development of the head and neck. The students are divided into groups. They each get one of the cards, and then they collaborate together to try to figure out and map how the embryonic development of the head and neck works, right? And then I'm circulating throughout the classroom. We actually go to the boards. We've got sticky tap. They make their head develop however it makes sense to them. And I come around and, say, well, you got a couple things right, but what do you think of this? And then I'll go to the next one until they have figured out how this process all happens. Again, the real world application. So how is this information relating to what I'm going to do at the end? Using case studies to get that point across has worked for me throughout a PowerPoint again, instead of me just standing up there talking about an idea or a concept or even terms. We'll do peer sharing or think, pair, share. Well, I'll put something up on the PowerPoint. They get a minute to think about it, and then they gear up, okay, decide what their answers were. Now with a class of 104, I can't go through everybody's, but we'll pick up some of the answers, make sure that we're on track. And then again, if somebody wants to post extra stuff after class or say something, that they have the ability to do that through the discussion boards or whatnot. So yeah, I echo everything these two ladies have said, and I would encourage you again with those big classes, just try to build a little bit of a relationship with the student, and then I think some of those behavioral management problems decrease a little bit for you when you build that relationship, when they're not just a face or what they perceive as a number at the back of the class, that they will be more actively engaged in their own learning. And that isn't easy. 104 names, it's not easy, but tricks, we take photographs in smaller groups. That seems to help me to be able to put a name to a face in a quicker amount of time. Yeah. That's all I
So I know sometimes we hear about, especially when you have large classrooms and you cannot, lot of students there, if you have a small group of disruptive students who could be talking, how do you manage that in a large classroom? And that is to anybody.
I go stand by. I'm not in like a really like intimidating way, but it does sort of stop them from talking, like just near them, making eye contact. I can say if it's when I am speaking to the class, I will just stop, and it's usually their peers that will effectively manage the problem for me. And I will stop as long as it takes for the attention to be brought back to the class.
I do the same. I just stop and I stare. And I smile. Are you done? Yeah? Okay. Just that small interaction that's not threatening generally curbs the behavior. And then if it's continuing, it's the people around them that are like, come on, what are you doing?
Any other questions from them?
I have two. Okay. Is there a limit on how many students can actually log into those kind of online applications like Kahoot?
Not to my knowledge.
Not that I've seen.
So we don't need a license for that, because I know I've had that issue in the past where not everyone in the class could actually log into it. So it's good to know in Kahoot. And then the other one was for exam facilitation. How do you guys manage that?
I think because we have the largest class size, I get another instructor in with me, and there's always 2 people in the classroom to help invigilate or proctor the exam. Yeah, and when we're walking
Something that we've been doing is using the lockdown browser. And then there's always somebody who's got too old of the device or anything, so make a copy of that exam. And they come in and if they're having trouble logging in, they put their name on the board. And I have a copy on D12, so then I have them, but I keep the front row clear, and anyone who's having a problem with it, they sit in the front, so I can keep an eye on them because we have 7-6, and the people who are in the lockdown browser in the back, and I don't have to worry that they're in and out of it. So, and it's worked really previously, it hasn't worked well, but now the lockdown browser seems to be working.
Have you also heard the issues then when you're trying to review the exam with the lockdown browser?
They haven't.
That's totally true.
Where did you guys check out Eric Reserve's session he was here a few years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, because he had a really cool technique too, and he did it in Orpheus Theater, which is, so it's not the best learning environment for big classes, but his idea, which I really liked it too, is that he gave like a mini lecturette, like a 5-10 minutes on a concept, and then he posted a question, and he used some tool like Kahoot, it wasn't Kahoot, but something similar. He posted a question there that was kind of a common misperception that students often have about that subject matter. And then he could see these people voting, and it was generally kind of all over the board, they were in agreement. And then you had to find somebody who had an answer that was different than yours. And you had to talk and rationalize why yours was correct and why theirs. And then ultimately try to, they were trying to get to the right answer through that collaborative conversation. And then he would go back to it and say, okay, here, and then they got asked again. So then you would see, okay, there's more people that are getting the right answer now after that conversation. It was a really powerful technique, and it was engaged, like that room was buzzing, and it was, that huge, nasty theater thing. So that was a really cool technique too. I don't know if anybody's been trying that, but it was a really good methodology.
I think I tried something similar in my class, and I think it's any class, there's one specific class I do that in. Like, if a student has a question, I just step back and say, what do you guys think? And then this fosters the thinking, the evaluating of the question. I can see where their heads are at and maybe why they're not coming to the correct answer. long before I share my expertise with you. So we'll take the 5 minutes, you guys can discuss amongst each other. Sometimes it's just one-on-one right across the room and somebody gets really passionate about it, like, okay, be okay. But for the most part, people are respectful, and that, you know, we can say to our students, be a better critical thinker, or you can teach them to do that. And to me, that kind of conversation is teaching them how to do it, how to suss out levels of information together, and that I believe in you and you're smart enough to be doing it. You might not come to the right answer every time, but we'll get there together. And so when they aren't coming to the right answers, I'll just say, okay, just relax. And let me just share maybe a component that you're missing to come to the right answer. As soon as I share it, the whole room goes, oh, and then they get to their conclusions. So they, again, this coaching team aspect is, you know, we're being responsible to each other and they're feeling like they can be successful. And I think that's why people come. More than I'm just reiterating what you've already read. There has to be a connection happening there, and there has to be value in a classroom setting.
I have a question. So do you find when you shrink your PowerPoints down to such a small level that your compliance with people actually doing pre-readings goes up because you're not going through everything? Because I think that's sometimes the struggle with some of our folks. Like we have folks that every week they're prepared, they come, and there's other ones that I'm sure haven't cracked the textbook all year and they're shocked by some of the material that's like, oh, it's in there.
I have two problems. Sometimes I find that people go, oh, the reading is overwhelming. And I'll say to them, why don't you come to class and see what I've pulled out as you need to know this stuff, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed. Take your tablet, pull up the PowerPoint PDF version, write your notes beside it. Then you can go back to your book, find out where is that important information. The second thing is I believe that the student has a responsibility to be in the middle. You know, if I've got 3 students that out of 76 that are struggling, at least I can focus and give a student learning plan to those students. Are you doing your reading? Yes. Can you prove to me that you've been doing your reading? No. Okay, because when you come and you meet me in the middle with your reading, then when you come to class, this is where you get to apply all the information. Generally by week 2, you see people kind of panicking and then they kind of get themselves into gear. And that's where I feel like you're an adult learning and you need to meet me in the middle. And I'm pretty frank about it. I don't beat around the bush, because in the past when I have beat around that bush, I've given all my time to those 3 people and not to the group learning session.
So, and I think it's, for with our students, sometimes they often get very overwhelmed with the amount of material we give them to read. So I have students who say, well, you give me a chapter to read, and there's D2L, and there's a lecture, and there's clinic. What do you want me to know? Yeah. So it's the messaging from us is, okay, what is important? What is the nice to know, must to know, and so on, because they really they come from different backgrounds, and so the learning styles are like very different. And I find students that really try to memorize everything one by one, and we tell them not to, but they didn't really know how to function after that. So I think it's our messaging as well. You have your readings, but you come to those lectures and we will pinpoint those information. But sometimes that goes the other way because they're like, well, I don't need to read all this. So it's like.
So one thing we started doing with some courses, it has to be appropriate to the courses, but is we were finding that some students were not coming to lab prepared. And so we created pre-lab questions on D2L. Mm-hmm. So they get the mark or they don't get the mark. Mm-hmm. But if they've done readings and they've gotten a mark for doing the questions, and then we can see who's actually prepared for lab and who isn't prepared for lab and where we need to spend our time, our energy on. So that really helped. And then one thing I did this year as part of my first A&P class, because that's my largest class, it's 54 students, give or take. And I have a speed dating game. So it doesn't help me learn their names, but it forces the students to go to each other and basically introduce themselves to each other. And then they sign off. And it starts to build that cohesion in the classroom so that nobody gets lost in there. And it's a really wonderful day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back to your question, is in doing what is being done with kind of minimizing the amount of information in a PowerPoint, you're actually fostering more of a learner-centered approach and getting that student to take more responsibility and be more engaged in their learning process, which will hopefully end up to a successful outcome.
Can I ask sorry, I forgot your name.
Cindy.
So we had done pre-lab assignments and it was like maybe 10% or something like that. We found that it inflated their grades. So we had our students who were really struggling. They were getting through lab because they got this 10%. So do you assign a grade to it or do you make it like a must-pass component?
It's part of the lab mark. So any lab is worth 5 marks. And if they don't do the pre-lab questions, well, they've already lost a mark. So it's incorporated into that day's work. So the being prepared for lab is doing the pre-lab questions, and it doesn't have its own standalone mark. We did that first year. I did that, and it did inflate the marks too much. So now they're only worth doing in preparation for the lab, but it still helps me keep track of who's doing the work and who isn't doing the work. And it does make a big difference in their lab grade at the end of the year. So don't make it a separate mark, include it with that day's work.
We've also just, we had that challenge as well where they were really inflating marks, right? So we've actually made it a component. You can't come into lab until you've done your pre-lab assignment. And so you can leave and do it and then come back when you're prepared. But we just put a 5 minutes before lab. Everyone needs to be done their lab. We look at it on D2L and you can't come into lab until you've completed the pre-lab.
I think we're almost at 10 to take this opportunity to thank our panel for sharing their experiences with us and also for all of you for coming, taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy it is for you guys who just studying on. But I think it's important. I think it's important for us to build that community practice and to share our experiences and what we're doing in the classroom so that it can benefit others within helping other safety and hopefully safe as well. But I was starting small with H&PS, so thank you very much. I do have those feedback surveys. I really appreciate it if you could fill those out. And if there are other topics that you feel that may help you moving forward for your own personal or professional development, we try and look at those as well. So these sessions would be a blend of our own experiences as well as some experts coming from outside to talk about it. But I just didn't want it to become just experts. Because sometimes they go, oh, well, they don't know what we do here. You know, they're not living our life. So I think it's kind of nice to have some of us stand up and say, because, you know, you're doing the same thing as you guys are doing, and numbers are similar. So it's kind of different. But anyways, thank you, Andy. We're going to have a good afternoon.
I will take my hand. Oh, did you?